If there's a gap between the person you are and the person that you want to be, this one small idea might change everything. Because every time that I use this idea in my content, when I've talked about how to stop people pleasing, when I've talked about improving your productivity, it creates light bulb moments for people. I get comments and people are like, man, like that really clicked for me. Welcome to Grow with Intention, the podcast for people who want to create a life that feels good. Before I share some step-by-step instructions on how to do this for yourself, I want to share a really good example of how someone used this idea to change their life. So John Harrison was 3.5 years old when his mom went on a trip to Europe with his grandma, and she was gone for 6.5 weeks. When she came back, he led her out to the garden. He wanted to show her some petunias, but as he pointed to the petunias and tried to tell her about them, he struggled to get his words out. Before she'd left, he'd talked as fluently as a 3-year-old might. When she returned, he had developed a severe stutter that would plague him all the way up until his 20s. John's go-to strategy became silence. So whenever he felt like he wouldn't be able to get a sentence out, he would just divert to going quiet. And so when he hit around 25, he was like, nah, I'm going to do something about this. He tried LSD, he tried drama classes, therapy groups, speech therapy, Toastmasters. He did everything that he could think of. And as he did all of this self-work, he realized that the problem that he needed to solve wasn't the problem of stuttering. Instead, he needed to dismantle stuttering into its parts and then solve those parts. Because the harder he tried to solve his stuttering problem, the more he reinforced its presence. In his words, in order to have something to solve, you must continually recreate it. So instead, he destroyed its structure. Instead, he started solving for things like, hey, when I speak, I'm constantly visualizing what I'm afraid will happen, not what I want to happen. He started focusing more on building his tolerance for speaking vulnerably. He started working on how to feel more enthusiastic and excited about the things that he would say. He stopped focusing on the big problem of stuttering and he started getting specific about what his actual struggle was. And John used this for stuttering, but it's helpful for any time when there's a gap that exists between where you are and where you want to be. Most people obsess over what they want to change. I want to stop being so insecure. I want to stop being so anxious. I want to stop being so disorganized. If instead you start to dismantle whatever you're struggling with into its parts, you'll start to immediately feel like change is more possible. For example, in my episode on people pleasing, which I'll have linked in the show notes, one of the things that I beg people to do is to stop calling themselves people pleasers, because what does that even mean? I know very few full-on people pleasers that are people pleasers in every aspect of their life. Instead of saying I struggle with people pleasing, start saying I struggle with saying no to my coworkers. Excuse the bad audio, I didn't quite finish this thought. Instead of calling yourself a people pleaser, it serves you more to get really specific about what your actual problem or problems are. When you start saying I underreact when people hurt me, or I don't confront people when I feel resentful, that means a whole lot more. Immediately, when you start getting more specific and really identifying the actual problem, it feels more possible to solve. But I still don't think that that's quite specific enough. And this is where John Harrison's hexagon of stuttering comes in. If you're audio only, the stuttering hexagon has each corner labeled. The labels are beliefs, perceptions, emotions, behaviors, intentions, and physiological responses. So John, instead of tackling stuttering, tackled his beliefs. He tackled his perceptions that influenced his stuttering, the emotions that would arise in him that could contribute to its stuttering, his behaviors, his intentions, etc., etc. So if we go back to people pleasing, in this case, we've broken it down into one of the real problems, which is I struggle to say no when my colleagues ask me to do things. If you use the hexagon, you could dismantle that even further. For example, feelings. You might realize, actually, I get overwhelmed with a feeling of stress and anxiety when my coworkers ask me for something. And actually, I perceive their requests as demands, and I expect consequences when I don't comply. Also, I don't like sitting with the feeling of thinking that someone is disappointed in me. I need to raise my tolerance for that feeling. And on a more practical level, I don't know how to say no in a kind way. Sometimes all this does is helps you to create a better relationship between you and the problem, helps you to de-identify with the problem. So a mini move to take to put this into practice only take like 20 minutes of your time, would be to think of just one label that you've given yourself that implies that there is a gap between where you are and where you want to be. For example, maybe you do call yourself insecure, disorganized, hot-headed, flaky. Then take that label, throw it in the trash, look at that stuttering hexagon, because it's actually a really good place to start, and ask yourself, actually, what are the feelings that arise that contribute to my insecurity, my flakiness? What are the beliefs that I hold that contribute to ABC? What am I perceiving in the world that contributes to this problem? I promise, once you do this, it will start to feel more possible for you to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. I end each episode of Grow with Intention with my Recs of the Week to help you to dive deeper into the podcast topic episode. The first recommendation of the week is, of course, Redefining Stuttering by John C. Harrison, where he shares his story, but he also shares a whole bunch of information on how to recover from stuttering. You might not want to read it because you're like, well, I don't struggle with stuttering. Either do I, except sometimes when I'm on camera, which low-key I think is actually a thing for a lot of people. But while this is a book about stuttering, it's actually a book about behavior change. You could 100% read this, have a completely different problem in mind, and find the ideas in this book extremely helpful. It's also a free PDF. You can Google it and download it. I'll have it linked down below. And the other recommendation I would have is my podcast episode on desperate energy, which is that kind of energy that you get when you want something so bad that it's almost like your want kind of repels the thing that you want. I talk about that in depth in that podcast episode. It's actually uploaded on my main channel. I'll have that linked in the show notes. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you soon.